Hello everyone, good afternoon, welcome to this new lecture in our program on the modern novel. My name is Fouzi Slisli. Today's lecture, number 12, we're going to do a revision of the first component of the course, which was elements of modernism. And just to give you an idea, lecture number 13 is going to do a revision on Animal Farm, and lecture 14, the final one, will be a revision of Lord of the Flies. So let's begin. Modernism. We saw that modernism refused direct representation of reality. Modernism was against realism because modernism rejected the idea that language and literature can represent reality in a realistic way. So modernism chose to go for more symbolic expressions. So there is movements that appeared like symbolism, expressionism, where they think that language should be used to symbolize or express rather than to portray. Because language is not like a camera. It cannot just take, events from real life and just transpose them into words. It would fail. So, in a way, modernism declared that realism is a failure and that true and genuine expression should use language in a way to express what's beyond language. So, and we saw this with examples of expressionism, with the painting of Edward Munch, for example. There is a favor of expressing an inner vision, an inner reality, an inner emotion, or a spiritual reality, because those, according to modernism, are more authentic than just transcribing realistic events on the paper using language. Surrealism is another example of a modernist movement in art that rejects realism and declares realism to be a failure, and chose instead to try to capture what they thought is a more authentic reality, but that exists beyond realism, hence the name surrealism. And it aims to bring a fuller awareness of human experience, both conscious and of the unconscious states. We said that the words that describe modernism in art and literature are words like decentered, pessimistic, disaffected, unhappy. The literature, modernist literature, is always a literature in crisis. We saw that with with Lord of the Flies. It's a crisis. The story is a crisis of human beings primarily. We saw that with Animal Farm. It's a crisis of political crisis, a crisis of language, a crisis of honesty, a crisis of values. There is a sense of loss and despair, which also we have seen in both novels, in Animal Farm and Lord of the Flies. There is violence and alienation, which also we have seen strongly present in Animal Farm and in Lord of the Flies. There is historical discontinuity, decadence and decay, a rejection of history, and unavoidable change. And what modernism does is attempt to elevate art over everything else. Art over morality, over money, over middle-class values. And there is an alienation from social reality. Modernism is characterized chiefly by a rejection of 19th century traditions and the conventions of realism, or in poetry of traditional meter. So in poetry we find free verse as a characteristic of modernist poetry. Modernity is also predominantly cosmopolitan, which means it's urban. It reflects a city culture as opposed to the countryside, and it expresses a sense of urban and cultural dislocation, a sense of not knowing, or a sense of being in the wrong place. Modernism also tries to capture psychological time rather than real time. It tries to capture streams of consciousness rather than organized thought processes. For modernism, art is unique and original. Art is anti-commercial. It rejects commercialism, and it explores the human subconscious, just like we do just like Lord of the Flies does by exploring the human subconscious and the human inclination and readiness towards violence and evil. Modernism relies and employs myth as a reaction against scientific rationalism. They use sensuality, intuition, and a search for truth. Time in modernism is circular rather than linear. It feels that human character can only be known through memories and thoughts versus external descriptions, and it reacts against realism and Victorian morality. They find sexuality and sexual desire as a valid subject of discussion and of literary creation, and modernism in general is disenchanted and happy. It's a literary form that expresses human beings in a disenchanted and unhappy state, in a state of crisis. As far as writing techniques, modernism experiments with point of view and narrative structure. It rejects chronological and narrative continuity, and literature is a language game. It's a game of language. We see it in the use of the allegory in both Animal Farm and in Lord of the Flies. They are both dystopias and they are both allegories. And that shows that the story in both novels does not try to recreate events from real life, but rather it tries to tell a story by telling a story. So they tell a story about animals or boys stranded in an island, but it's just a way of trying to tell another story. And that's the allegory form in modernist literature. There is also the stream of consciousness and the unreliable narrator. They use fragments, non-linear plots. There is juxtaposition of multiple points of view sometimes, and psychological realism, that they seek to represent the character's thoughts, feelings, and memories in his or her consciousness, rather than represents what the character is doing externally, what events the character is participating in. If modernism can be said to have a mission, then this mission is that literature and art is an art object produced by consummate craft rather than as a statement of emotions. It is not a set of stylistic features, it is an impulse to perfect. Also a refusal of cliches and a refusal of the system of taboos. It's a reaction against degraded realism, especially in the marketplace, and a repudiation, a rejection of monopoly capitalisms and its effect on the human being. Conformity, it's a rejection and repudiation of conformity, standardization, repetition, seriality, and stupidity. Modernism tries to create something fresh, new, tries to dig deep into the human being and find untapped energies to bring back to the surface, to transform the reality in which we live. Modernism is not happy with the reality we live in. It does not seek to describe it or capture it. It seeks to tap into human energies that are dormant inside to transform this reality and make it something new. I hope this short revision is helpful for you to keep in mind the principles of modernism that we discussed, and that those help you in understanding the two novels that we have studied so far. In the next lecture, we will do a revision of Animal Farm and the most important discussion points in Animal Farm. Until then, I bid you farewell, and I will see you in the next lecture. Take care. Have a good day.